Bonsoir à tous et à toutes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alexandra Lynn. I'm a Public Programs Assistant here at the CCA. Merci à tous d'être venus avec nous pour cette conférence de l'artiste Susanne Kriemann. Avant de vous introduire notre invité de ce soir, je voudrais tout d'abord souligner que le CCA a entrepris de développer une reconnaissance territoriale à long terme et en collaboration avec des membres de la nation Kanien'kehá:ka. Nous reconnaissons également les nombreuses nations qui sont les gardiennes de ces terres et de ces eaux, où vivent aujourd'hui diverses personnes issues des Premières Nations, Inuits et Métis. Le CCA est une institution issue de la colonisation et nous nous efforçons de susciter les relations positives avec les peuples autochtones et d'autres communautés de Tiohtià:ke, Muniang ou ce qu'on appelle Montréal. Notre engagement comprend des recherches, des programmes, des bourses, des collaborations dans le but de créer une reconnaissance territoriale vivante qui fournira un soutien et des ressources à long terme aux communautés et aux chercheurs autochtones. Ce soir, je vous souhaite la bienvenue à la 4e et dernière conférence de la série organisée dans le cadre de l'exposition Les vidéodocuments, la photographie en tant que projet, que le CCA a lancé en mai 2023. Cette exposition met de l'avant le rôle actuel de la photographie dans l'étude de l'architecture et de notre environnement bâti. Il s'agit d'un projet à long terme qui comprendra d'autres publications, des séminaires de recherche, une réflexion sur la collecte et la diffusion d'images photographiques, des expositions et bien sûr des programmes publics. Ce fut un plaisir d'avoir accueilli plusieurs artistes présentés dans le cadre et en dehors de l'exposition pour enrichir notre discussion sur la photographie et nous sommes ravis d'assister avec vous à cette dernière volet avec Susanne. L'exposition actuellement dans nos galeries principales est commissariée par Baz Brinson et Stefano Graziani et présente la photographie en tant qu'outil d'investigation et s'intéresse aux moyens par lesquels les photographes produisent des arguments visuels, des positions critiques, urgentes et innovantes concernant l'évolution de l'environnement bâti. Je vous invite à aller voir l'exposition si vous n'aviez pas déjà eu la chance. Elle sera présentée dans nos salles jusqu'au 7 avril. La publication qui accompagne le projet sera aussi disponible à partir de mi-avril. Et vous trouverez de nombreux articles sur notre site web qui adressent les thématiques de l'expo. C'est donc dans ce cadre que nous accueillons ce soir l'artiste Susanne Kriemann qui va nous parler de sa pratique photographique et de ses méthodologies de travail, tout en nous présentant des projets qu'elle a développés dans le cadre de sa recherche et de ses projets photographiques portant sur la radioactivité. Plusieurs de ces projets sont présentés dans nos salles, et notamment sa contribution au livre 10% Concerning the Image Archive of a Nuclear Research Centre, où elle documente la contamination des paysages allemands due à l'extraction de minerais radioactifs ou à des recherches sur la radioactivité. Son travail combine des images d'archives, des autoradiographs et des heliogravures produites en utilisant des pigments extraits de plantes contaminées. Susanne vit et travaille à Berlin. Elle est professeure de photographie artistique à l'Université des Arts et du Design de Karlsruhe et cofondatrice de l'initiative artistique Air Berlin Alexanderplatz. Son travail a été exposé internationalement, entre autres au Waters Institute à San Francisco, à la Kunsthal Wien, au Stedelijk Museum à Amsterdam, à la Kunsthal Winterthur et à l'Arnolfini à Bristol. Elle a participé à de nombreuses biennales et résidences d'art dans le monde entier et elle a co-publié 17 livres d'artistes depuis 1998. Dont certaines sont présentées dans l'exposition. Susanne présentera en anglais et nous prendrons un moment à la fin de la présentation pour une période de questions-réponses en français et en anglais. Veuillez noter également que cet événement est filmé et sera mis en ligne sur notre site web sous peu. after doing my little introduction in French, to prelude that Susanne's presentation tonight will be in English, and we will be taking questions at the end in both English and French. Please note that tonight's event will be filmed and uploaded to our YouTube page. Thank you thus far for your attention, and please join me in welcoming to the stage Susanne Kriemann.
So, good evening, everyone. This is my first slide. So, I'm very, very happy and challenged to be tonight here on stage. I want to thank you so much for coming. And I hope that we're going to have, after my presentation, a discussion about certain themes that I will tackle in this talk. I have prepared quite a lot of slides, I have to warn you. And I also weave the representation of my artistic practice with archival images. And maybe already there we enter the interesting but also problematic relation that photography offers as a field, and that is that we often cannot differentiate between a documentation and that what it is, a photograph. Therefore, I would like to start with a quotation of Robin Wall Kimmerer in the book Braiding Sweetgrass that she wrote in 2012. And this quotation has been following, or let's say influencing, my practice a lot lately. A bay is a noun only if water is dead. When bay is a noun, it is defined by humans, trapped between its shores and contained by the word. But the verb viik gamaa, to be a bay, releases the water from its bondage and lets it live. To be a bay holds the wonder that for this moment the living water has decided to shelter itself between these shores, conversing with cedar roots and flock of baby mergansers, because it could do otherwise, become a stream or an ocean or a waterfall, and there are verbs for that too. This is the language that lets us speak of what wells up all around us. In this quotation, I have somehow found another reading of the word photograph. And if we would put the whole idea of a photograph being trapped in its chemicals, its papers, its material entities, but also its problematic history of the technical photographical story, we could find ways perhaps to engage with the medium that takes it from these bondages and lets it live in different ways. So I would like to take you today to a place that is a forest that has been photographed here on this image in 1957 by someone sitting in an airplane, holding a camera, and documents something that is yet to become. This place is the beginning of a former nuclear research reactor. Actually, I say former, but in this image, it is the future. It is the moment when, in the side of a virgin forest, one of the few left in Germany, a couple of people have decided to undertake a research. Why I show you this picture is that it is the picture that is not in the actual collection of the former nuclear research reactor that has been collected after that moment, and it is a photo that is part of my contribution to the book 10% concerning the image archive of the nuclear research reactor, which I hold up here. I stumbled upon this photo because quite often in my researches it always somehow starts with cutting down wood, and then things are implemented and they start to grow. And that growth is not only related to research that has been certainly excellent, certainly vital for the development in electricity in at least the Western world, but it also is a mode of doing things that are not yet really visible to everyone and that are also engaging by destroying. So what you see here is the current satellite view of that very beginning. It is the now Campus Nord of the Karlsruhe Institute of Photography, and it has become a million times larger than that very first cutting of the trees. So this is a satellite image that I took today. The story of this archive, as you can see here, again, 2 photos of the very beginning of the cutting down of the trees, is accumulated 220,000 photographs that have been collected, photographed by actually people that have been employed by this research center to document any step of the nuclear research from the beginning in the 1950s until its end in the 1990s. And how did I come across this collection? I started a professorship in 2017 in Karlsruhe, and because I've been very long time interested in the phenomenon of radioactivity, its afterlife, I was asking myself, is there something in Karlsruhe to be found in this respect? And I Googled actually archive and nuclear, and I came to this place that is has been called the Karlsruhe Institute of Nuclear Research. And I called the archivist, and he said that it actually comes along quite well, my call, because he's about to digitalize the 220,000 images. And he is actually quite helpless with the task of what to show and what to not show, of what to include, and also that there is actually no funding for it, because it was the moment when Germany just decided to exit nuclear power. So everything that documented the history that Germany was one of the states to absolutely engage in the making of nuclear power was not so welcome, let's say. So these 2 images show how they were cutting down the trees. Here is another image that shows how they were kind of testing radioactivity on potatoes. So there is 220,000 pictures that equally show great stuff, weird stuff. I will show you some more things. But at the same time, and that's what was very interesting for me, is that we could actually visit the site of where everything took place together with the students. So here you see me with my students in the Research Center for Nuclear Waste Deposit that is still going on there. Here you see us looking into a hot cell that is inside of that place, aquarium-like place. It is highly radioactive stuff. It's a test that's going on for 10 years, and as you can see, it's quite a chaos inside of the box, something that in the relation to nuclear waste storage that should be safe for 100,000 or 1 million years, 10 years seems to be a very short moment in time, and it was very interesting to be actually there and see it with our own eyes. And then together with the students, we took out images after image. We started to show them. We make exhibitions with these images. We kind of approached these images of what they were. They were extremely strange, interesting photographs of all kinds of things that are related to the nuclear research, the nuclear family, as they were calling themselves, the nuclear tests that they did. So I will show you some of them right now. But what I wanted to show you in the very beginning is that it was not just sitting in an archive and looking at photographs. We really visited the sites, we traveled around, we visited the forest, we visited the hot cells, we were talking with all these people that were still there. Also, the center was closed in the 90s. We looked at all the movies, the kind of propagandistic kind of stuff, but also we talked with the people that were there photographing, that were there cleaning, that were there living, and seeing also that village that was kind of chosen as the destination for this nuclear research center to grow and to be more wealthy and all these kind of things. So after 5 years of engaging with the archive, inviting lecturers, seeing that some other people in, for example, Stockholm at the Royal Academy are doing similar research, we have decided to do a book. And that book is called 10% Concerning the Image Archive, of a nuclear research reactor. It has 520 pages in English and 520 pages in German, so it's 2 books actually. It's been designed by Moritz Appich and Cecile Kobel and edited by Judith Mills, Friederike Schäfer, Klaus Nippert and Elke Leinweber and me. And published by Spectre Books. So here you can see some photos of it. And what is very special, I think, about the book, and I think also why this book is kind of different maybe than some other books with archives, is that we decided from the very beginning to make it a collective process with the archive. So we have invited 36 people to come and see the archive independently and also write about their selection. And then in the end, in the book is consisting of loads and loads of photographs that are chosen by the different people. We invited a politician that is anti-nuclear power, but we also invited the physician that is absolutely pro-nuclear power, and it was very interesting to bring these 2 different mindsets. I mean, I'm really an anti-nuclear power person, so for me it was really also quite interesting to work with people that are outspokenly safe, it's great, it's amazing, and stuff like this. So, but we decided that to really voice this as a kind of moment in history, we have to include all these voices. So when we were starting editing the book, we were sitting together and kind of having the idea of a party or something, and we had tables, and we would think who would come together with whom and have an interesting conversation. And in this moment, that was the way we edited the book. So here, for example, you see quite an interesting photograph. It's an explosion that simulates a nuclear explosion. And there's many images of explosions. They have been fascinated with explosions to try to find out how concrete behaves with the nuclear and how this different materials behave. But also here you can see, for example, that this is the headquarters of the center, so it looks very 60s, like a bit James Bondish, and then on the other side you see documentation of the nuclear family. They have had concerts together, they have dinners together, that were drunken together. Everything is documented in this thing. But what really struck us was like how to actually select it without having a theme. So just see it as a huge material thing that came to us, and we as a kind of group of people collectively, we tackle all these images and then we bring them together in the book. And I think what is really special about the book is that it works as an archive as well. So all the images have archival numbers that link you to the digital archive. And when you enter these numbers, you land on the digital archive page and you will see other images that are not in the book and that are kind of leading you your own way through this archive. Here, I really find it such a curious thing, this photograph. It's a coal slag heap. That's, of course, it's not a real photo, it's a montage. But they wanted to show how peaceful nuclear power is in relation to coal power. And they edited it in the site of the Nuclear Research Centre. And also here and to the right, you see the nuclear dome, an image that in architectural discourse has been very much discussed, of these kind of dome-like figures that look like kind of like holy sites or really beautiful sites, something that are like kind of everywhere to be seen and also quite often similar. And so somehow I feel that in this book we try to find a way how to see the archive as a potential to learn about that history that has influenced the reading of nuclear power in Germany. And so to come back to my photograph, my selection, I wrote a text in this book, and I want to read a small chapter of it. In 1957, a photographer sits in a plane. His camera is loaded with a black and white film. The photo of the Hartwald forest captured from above, pauses whatever was previously going on. Micro and macro dissolve. Leaves, needles, and branches become a challenge for legibility. We as spectators can no longer make out the ant species we named, the inhabitants in the treetops, as well as those of the trunks, are missing in the image. The distance fails to capture the reality of these being forest. A bleak rectangle is placed directly in the middle of this photographed forest. Within it, a circular pit dug deep into the ground, therein subsequently the reactor. The image documents the first dimension of exploitation of the hardwood forest in Karlsruhe for the purpose of nuclear research. Wilhelm cycled around this area in an almost daily basis. He measured, collected, copied, and dismantled, while the baldness spread from 20 hectares to 156 hectares in the midst of the forest. I become we become forest. Wilhelm is a person that has recently passed away at the age of 96. He was named the oldest environmental activist of Germany, and he was the forester of the Hardwald at the moment when the nuclear reactor was built. So what he did is indeed cycle every day around this always growing center and photograph the leaves that were sometimes brownish because of some radiation exiting this site. So for me, for my contribution to this book, I decided to enter an archive into the existing archive that for me was missing, and that is the archive of an environmental activist. Because in this whole nuclear research documentation, you could see the history of photography of the 20th century clearly. In the 80s, they experimented with colors. They were Ranga patchists kind of things. They were kind of drawn into portrait photography, or there's all these links, but what has been missing is exactly that exterior, the very exterior of the site that is marked by the frame or the fence, and that person that is excluded from this discourse and sees all the time that there are leakages, that there are pollution in the water, and there is all these kind of transformation of plants. Some plants have become orange, some plants have become it's not a big thing, let's say, and that's also something that is quite, in my work, quite often visible, that I'm not looking for the most spectacular moment where you can see that's the atomic explosion, but I am looking very much at the very tiny things that actually constitute that moment of the slow, violent process of nuclear power. Because when we see the dimension of that space in our modern history between the 1930s, 1920s, when it became nuclear, to now, it is a tiny little moment that has an amazing afterlife that sometimes is called 100,000 years, sometimes 1 million years. And with this, I would like to introduce you to a research that I have been doing since over 10 years with the mineral pechblende. Pechblende is the name that is uraninite in English, or pitchblendy. And why I was coming into this work process was actually because of that name. I started to get really wondering about two things that are quite related to the photographic story. The blende, it's the diaphragma in German, and pech, which is bad luck, or also pitch black. It's two things that kind of accompany quite often me, for example, when I don't manage to put the right blender, the right diaphragma, and the photo comes black. But then also, I was very curious about that name that was included in a poetry by Lutz Seiler, Pitch and Blende, and the origin of this word. So this word goes back to 1700 and to a person that is called Klaproth. Klaproth has actually named a mineral that was black and kind of formless, let's say, to be pitch blende. So back then in time, the most miners were working on silver. Silver looks in the mountain as black as uraninite. And whenever they mined that mineral, they had bad luck because no one would buy it from them because they couldn't use it for the silver production. So even in this long time ago, the mineral was more like a kind of bad luck or something that no one wanted to have. And then, of course, with the whole research of the Curie, of Oppenheimer, of the making of the nuclear bomb and the nuclear power, this changed into a complete different narration. I show you this picture because it shows that thing, but it also shows nothing at all of what it is actually what we are looking at. And in this time when I started the research, I was very interested in the moment why in our time we have these kind of different illusions of landscape, what we're looking at. From one side, we're looking at the landscape as something through the lens, something beautiful, abstract, something far away, untouchable, absolutely like magnificent, and at the same time, all these landscapes are at one or the other moment, if there are minerals in the ground, if there are trees that can be exploited at one or the other moment, these landscapes will become subject to exploitation. And in this quote by Sartre, which I will not read to you, I think my English is not that great, but there is this exact moment described in a kind of, let's say, way that is quite, let's say, it's maybe an old-fashioned way of looking at the landscape as something untouchable versus the landscape that has been touched. So he talks about the field of snow as a kind of beautiful, untouched moment in the landscape. And the moment when we see the snow, we want to take it, we want to create a snowball, and then we destroy this white field. It has highly problematic, I think, connotations, but at the same time it says exactly about this threshold that quite often we encounter in the photographic moment, that from through the lens we see something, we see like this is amazing, and then later when we have taken the picture we walk further and we just don't have the same recognition of what we've just taken. And in the moment of this stone thing, that is the same stone leaving its autoradiographic traces on a sheet film. This two pictures, like the photo of the stone and also the photo of this autoradiograph, is one and the same thing, but in two different, very different ways of, let's say, understanding matter. And it's an exposure of 7 days, and these bubbles are radon, the gas that comes with the radioactive decay chain. And so the shape of the stone, maybe if you remember that photo before, and this kind of blurry thing. So in my research, I wanted to understand what fascinates me about radioactivity, but also how I'm, as an artist that does her job somehow, can relate to this in a certain amount of time. So I started to do tests that are related to human time. The 5 days a week workday, for example. So I would go in the morning on Monday to the museum, and I would give 4 sheet films to the museum, place a stone on top of this sheet film, and every other Monday I would take 1 sheet out, and after you see 4 weeks of artistic presentation somehow. I mean, it sounds maybe banal, but it's actually a whole conversation that I have since 10 years with this phenomenon of radioactivity and how to understand what it actually is. It's very, it's somehow doing it all the time. If you know that, and here I have shared with you the Karlsruhe Nuclear card. So the half-life of pitch blende is 4.46 billion years, and that is as old as the Earth is. So it is something that is an Earth time, that stone. At the same time, it is also a changer of its composition, because through the half-life, through the decay, it changes from uranium to thorium to protactinium to uranium again, to radium, to radon, to polonium, to lead, bismuth, and until it is stable, it is lead 206. In this decay chain, I figured that there are few, upon all these unimaginable amounts of time, there are a few timelines that are rather related to my human understanding of time, and that is 24 days, or 3.8 days, or 27 minutes, so I'm not yet talking that long, but I will definitely talk tonight, 27 minutes. And so in this decay chain, thinking through how to approach the mineral, I decided to put that stone into my working rhythm. Also, when the stone is in the collection in the 70s, it does it all the time. It did it 4 million years, and it will do it into the future. But in this moment of time, I kind of am in conversation with the stone, and we collaborate in a way. And in this research, I started to think, if the stone is showing its kind of image, where else can I see radioactivity being displayed? So in the text of Susan Shipley, Radical Contact Prints, she refers to an image of a pufferfish that has been sliced in half during Operation Crossroads and being exposed 48 hours to a sheet of film. And this pufferfish has eaten a radioactive algae. So in this book of Operation Crossroads, it's 1946, has been published. They document, of course, all these explosions, but at the very last page, they show that pufferfish and the algae. And that is something that has, again, like we have today often looked at archives, and at the very end of an album, all of a sudden a clue came out, a clue that is reflecting back to the idea and the dimension of what we have just looked at. So when you look at the book of Operation Crossroads, you see destruction, and also through the camera an almost admiring point of view to this destruction. And only at the very end, it reveals what is actually happening. That means that fishes are eating radioactive algae, and we're gonna eat these fishes. So further in the research, I found lots of books published in the 50s and 40s about how to do autoradiographs. And I also seen few things, the kidney, a piece of muscle. And to the right, it's actually a snake that has been exposed 48 hours to a sheet of film. It's part of the collection of two artists that are collecting animals and plants and objects in Fukushima Daiichi, and they donated this piece to my research. So quite often in my art works, I am not often taking the photos myself. I feel that it's very interesting to actually weave in the things that have been taken, and I couldn't take them in a way different. I kind of feel related to the narration of the picture, and I add things that I feel are missing. So I have here a documentation of an exhibition, 2016 in Prefix, curated by Jane Wilkinson, who is actually here. And it was the first moment when I actually, after all this research, I showed the work. We composed 4 plexi acrylic glass sheets. They have 4 different chapters. The first chapter is the autoradiograph with stones. The second chapter, autoradiographs with other personas, like a fish, a rat, a frog, a tree, and then some aerial photographs of a site of uranium mining that I will take you to right now. But on the other side, so you can see all the captions and read through all the information of the archival and also self-made images. So the work somehow situates itself in between the visual and also the kind of almost poetic or the reading of what you actually see, but you don't see both at the same time. So I will take you in my research to the site where pechblende has been found in 1740 and later also by Madame Curie. And that area has been mined, has been subject to uranium mining from 1946 to 1991 by a company that is the Wismut SDAG, a Soviet-German stock exchange company that was actually doing mining for the nuclear armament of the Soviet Union and also contributed to the making of the nuclear bomb by the Soviet Union and later also to fuel nuclear power plant like Chernobyl. What you see here is an image of the rehabilitation of the landscape that has been started in 1991 and will go on until 2046. This place is, let's say, a 2 hours ride from Berlin. It is also a 1 hour ride from where I have been born and lived. It is in the former GDR and it's now in Thuringia and Saxony and so the extreme shift of volumes between a kind of landscape that has been known in this part in Germany as a fairy tale landscape, as a mountainous landscape, has been reconstructed completely through the uranium rush, let's say, and then later through this kind of rehabilitation of the landscape. I'm interested in this because it shows ways of kind of dealing with landscape that are very foreign to me and that we will later not see anymore. So this photo has been taken in 2010. It's taken by the Wismut that has transformed from the stock exchange, the stock company, the GDR company to the West German company, the GmbH. It's a business now. And they are actually, they are responsible for the rehabilitation of everything that they have destroyed before somehow. And they didn't change even the name, which is highly problematic, I feel. What you see here is geotextile that has been covering a former radioactive slag heap. And on top of this applied soil. And now you will see just trees there. So nothing remains of this, what has been done underneath. And in 2016, I joined the geologists and biologists of the University of Jena, who have undertaken research on how to rehabilitate a landscape that is in partly subject to a huge trauma and that have certain tools. And they invited me to be 4 years joining their field laboratory, which you see here. This photo is taken by a scanner that you see on the right side. It's by the helicopter. There's this small thing. And this tool scans the landscape, and the places that are like white and shiny are still like radioactive. So then we start digging and we unearthing stuff from that moment of mining. And we also witness the situation the plant is in through the phytopen or fluopen. So it gives darkness to the leaf, and then the leaf gets stressed, and we can see how quickly or slowly it reacts. And then we see how this tree is affected by the heavy metals and kind of leftovers of the mining history. For me, these things are interesting because it expands, again, the notion of the photographic thing. The scanner that is extremely large, that is scanning a landscape for its kind of still image possibilities, because these radioactive things can produce images. The fluopen that shows the tree and its reaction in photosynthesis and its tiredness somehow. And so I was harvesting together with the biologist and the geologist. We have harvested plants to research where actually sits that what we call a kind of cocktail. Here you have the cocktail in the plant. So it has aluminium, arsenum, cesium-137, copper, gadolinium, germanium, lanthanum. These are 3 rare earth elements that also played a role in our smartphone touch screens and also in Kodak lenses. Lanthanum has been used by Kodak to make the lenses, especially like durable. And magnesium, mercury, nickel, uranium, vanadium, and zinc. And so the first thing I thought, this is like everything that is also in my phone, only not the quantity, but somehow it is the plant that I am working with or kind of trying to communicate with, maybe a futuristic seeing tool, persona, things like this. So I got very interested in this plants. So here is image that I have composed. So like maybe to understand a little bit better my process, that the research and then the exhibiting and the publishing of books goes somehow hand in hand. So often I'm researching and then I have a show. I have the moment where I think this moment of the research is a kind of like a mushroom that can become something more visual than the research that I see, like a big mycel that is kind of often not so visible. And in that sense, we have exposed 3 different herbs: wild carrot, false chamomile, and bitter herb or ox tongue. These are 3 herbs that are wild, but also come back into our food chain. The carrot, the chamomile, that is tea, and bitter herb, that is like a kind of medication herb, weed. And we have grained them, and then the pigments that resulted from the graining are printed here. And so at the one hand, I have a kind of scale of the plants themselves before I cut them in pieces and grain them to pigments. And at the same time, the matter of the plant, the actual plant, is on the photo in this print. And so somehow this is inhabited by all these extra minerals and data. And then further in the research, I photographed these plants. Like here you see the wild carrot and the false chamomile, and also these 2 photos, and also the ones that are here on the show, are actually printed with the very pigment that is made from the plant. So when you think about what is an image, and that is something that keeps me quite busy for a long, long time, the image is, in this sense, not only a printed matter, but it also has all these elements that are kind of alive. So when you see the rare earth elements that have also sometimes radioactive power, and uranium that has also radioactive power, these decay chains, even though in tiniest of its existence, go on to be Earth time. So while the pigment that has printed the work is plant pigment and has a certain lifespan, when it's exposed to UV light, it will probably fade slowly but constantly when we would hang it in the sun. All these elements that are inside of the pigments will continue to exist in this dimension of the Earth time. And I have made some more experiments, but then I went, every year I'm going back to this area. So I also do research in archives, and I see photographs, aerial photographs that have actually documented this location. So the plant matter grows just on this place. This place is now photographed. It is a photograph of now, today, but it shows a place that has been radioactive slag heap / a lake, let's say, full of radioactive water. So now I will show you a series of images that document backwards from today to 1968. what has happened with this landscape. And I find this rather amazing because I could not follow this process, but through the aerial photography and the archives that do these surveys in landscapes every year, I can somehow see what actually has happened and what the landscape has undergone. So this is a photo from 2013, where you still have some remains of the radioactively polluted water, and you see also the drying processes, so the amount of infrastructure that is necessary to actually undo what has been done through mining of uranium. And here it's even 2006. You see the amount of textiles that have been laid out on these shores of these kind of lakes to dry the radioactive water into dust, and then later they will be taken into the nuclear waste storage. So in this sense, for example, also looking at the very details of what it is that we call nuclear energy, that always starts in the mining, and then also later, what's left from the mining, these landscapes are, of course, have to be like transformed into nuclear waste barrels. So the amount of volume that is created through all this kind of, let's say, rather local activities is just expanding in time and space. And here is a photo from actually 1968, where you can see actually what is going on during the mining process. And then I have also worked with an archive of Michael Belaites, who has been an activist, environmental activist in GDR times, and he actually published a very famous paper that is called Pechblende, and that was in the 1980s, just before the end of the GDR, and that was the very first moment when actually it was published what was going on in this area. So again, the Wismut had a kind of camouflage name. It was not called uranium or pitchblende, but it was called Wismut. It's another mineral. And what they done was completely secret. Again, inside of the forest, inside of landscapes, and only through the eyes of Michael Belaites, we could now see what has been actually going on with the landscape. And it's very vital now to understand why these landscapes and also now the trees and the plants react like how they react. And motivated by this, I made a work that is related to, with textiles that look into the drying process so visualize the drying processes of these landscapes, and the formal aspect of these textiles is composed as a kind of visual collaboration between fungi and mycelia, photos of Michael Belaites that show these kind of tailings. And here also we have worked again with pigments. So in the exhibition and the duration of the exhibition, we have installed these pigments that are not fixed to silk. And in the time of the exhibition, they fade and it becomes like a kind of second dimension of time inside of the show, where you kind of not only are confronted, let's say, with a nuclear research or a kind of idea of a textile hosting or receiving dust, but also the actual matter being in the space and also subject to a kind of timeline again of an exhibition, for example, 3 months, and then the yellow would be almost white. And together with this work, I show archival photographs of the nuclear research I am undertaking, and also I again bring photographs together with material. Wool from sheep that eat on slag heaps, soil from this area where we have unearthed some nuclear stuff. And here is a photo of me at work. So I also wanted to show you that it's always this kind of sitting in the studio or sitting in an archive, learning more about that landscape, but also then going, and here in the left of the image, it's this exactly same hill that we have seen in the aerial photographs. In the end, I thought these plants have somehow not been represented in natural history or in our idea of the representation of plants in museums. The Biological Garden of Berlin offered for an exhibition the space to take over the showcases of this museum, where usually they would display like orchids or different beautiful plants, different things, how we actually learn about nature or how we learn about landscape. And what we have done is to bring these plants harvested from the site, and we just put them into the showcases. And then, of course, it's a museum, so we have to make sure that there is no dangerous, let's say, dust for things. So we have incorporated a kind of technique of trompe-l'œil. So I bring them in the showcases, I photograph them, and then and then we show actually the photographic prints, but they look as if the real plants are inside of the showcases. So yeah, this is like the last photo, and I'm also at the end of my talk. I want to say a few more things maybe, and also give you one idea of this this partner that I have somehow with these stones. And it's kind of a big question for me if the stone is, for example, like it's definitely not my cooperator or something. I cannot employ the stone. It's also not a camera. It's something that doesn't recognize me as someone that jumps around this thing. It has also no borders and recognizes not the table I do the radiographs. It doesn't recognize the sheet film. It just does it. Somehow this, what we don't understand, or I at least don't understand. At the same time, these autoradiographs are occurring, and I do it since 15 years, and on Monday I will go back to the museum and do again a kind of communication attempt. And I will do it probably for a long time to understand that this is always there because of the dimension of time. And somehow in this documents that I am elaborating with this action of returning, of actually caring somehow, I hope to show a kind of dimension of timeline with this phenomenon that gives more clues on this, what often is discussed, and then taking into other fields again, you know, like as an artist, and I will include myself into this working method, but I'm fascinated by, of course, the moment of discovering things or exploring things. And at the same time, I know that this is something that why I probably choose photography as my medium, but at the same time, I know it's actually something as a working method that I have to take aside. I actually don't want to be discovering things. I want to start in a way communicating with the tool in a more careful or more like in a way where I include failure or I include also invisibility. So not taking the photo, not going and not continuing with this way of making pictures, but still working a lot with archives. So these things are, I think it's a bit of a lifetime project, and it's not what I'm doing all the time. I do also nice things above ground with other landscapes, and so I'm not only in the darkness and looking at radioactive things. So, but yeah, I hope that you have some questions for me now, and I want to conclude.
I'm just wondering if you're aware of or in contact. We have the same problems in Canada.
I'm aware of
You know them all. Blake Fitzpatrick and the people who are doing it, the nuclear group. And
No, I don't know them. But
okay.
When I had the show with Prefix in Toronto, a lot of people told me the stories of what's happening here, and I've seen some films about the uranium mining.
Right. Robert Del Tredici, who lives in this town, was very early on, spent his entire life trying to make the phenomenon visible, something which is invisible. And I think he's had an extraordinary effect. So anyway.
That's nice and hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea to think about this work as something returning. So in May, I will go to Limousin in France, who also did uranium mining in a place near Limoges, which is extremely beautiful and has rivers and everything. And we will also do a harvesting and a kind of biological session of where are which heavy metals in the plants. And I feel that it's something that I haven't thought about before, but I find it, like in photography, you always think, of course, reproduction, that's the thing, you take a picture and then you reproduce it and stuff. But then, again, I said, like, also before that I feel quite not so challenged anymore by this way of working, and I feel more, in a way, approaching it again and again to question also the way how these things can be visualized. And so I feel that with going to another landscape, in another context, in another country, with researchers from there and together looking at the fields, is like maybe a second version or a way of doing the work again and again, but letting it become different all the time. So.
Yes, thank you, Susanne. That was a really nice presentation. Of course, especially after we spent the whole day in your company. I had a question based on the fact that we've met in another lifetime, I would say almost, when you just started out as a visual artist, but you already struck me as somebody who was very remarkable in the way you were thinking and talking about the work. And now seeing and hearing you explain the project that you're presenting here, I was wondering, how do you, as an artist, develop an understanding of your practice that allows you to pursue your fascination in a manner that supports your work as an artist, and maybe also to drive projects forward in directions that are new and innovative?
Yeah, I do this through the books, I think. So I publish, every work is published in a kind of artist book. I actually thank you for the question, because I think that there is a few things to answer in this respect. The one thing is about this thing that is called artistic research. And in Germany, this discussion is going on, also in the Netherlands. When I was living there, it became very academic somehow, that artistic research is like that and that and that. But 15 years ago, my husband and I, we founded a kind of residency that is based solely on artistic research, and that is in Berlin. And so through this working with and for other artists, our practice changed, and we were informed, and we informed each other together in this whole understanding of what is artistic research. And we kind of refrained a lot from this being described as a methodology, because this academic thing is sometimes really like counterproductive to this artistic way of working. And in this sense, I'm really, you have seen my presentation, it's a meandering. It's not a kind of, I found this and then I will do it, because that's my practice. So, but more like a kind of questioning all the time where I am with the medium at this moment, and also where I am with the research. So I often work with writers and scientists, and also with poems, and I also write myself. So more and more collectively. So I think this book, 10%, has, because we decided that we cannot direct someone or cannot ask someone actually to please work with the collection as we think, or we didn't want to make a book that shows the nuclear research as it was in a chronological way or something, but we thought if we do it, we have to invite all these voices, a bit like the book of Anna Löwenhaupt thing, The Mushroom at the End of the World, that tackles the Matsutake mushroom from all the different perspectives of its existence. And it's a kind of documentary book that challenges exactly the reading of this mushroom in a way that you can't only see it as the most expensive mushroom on the planet, or a mushroom that we can't see because it's hidden and it can only be smelled by deers, and then someone has to know how these deers smell. So she kind of, in her book, included the different economies and also ecologies of this mushroom, and I'm very fascinated by this working method. So I think that's a little bit how I try to work, looking at the things from these different angles and perspectives, but not like as a kind of I'm in the center, but more like I'm joining other people and other photographs.
Thanks, Susanne. I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the relationship that you established with the stone, with this a kind of idea of giving agency to this non-human, this natural element. And if I understand well, like she's radioactive. I don't know. He is radioactive. They has radioactive because of her nature.
Yeah.
Of their nature and so in a way you are allowing them to just show how they are.
Yes, and maybe no, because so my relationship to the stone is constituted by, of course, the curators of the collection, which work with me. So I worked in Museum of Natural History in Berlin, in New York, in Vienna, and also in the Wismut. And all these stones come from the same mountain. So somehow in the whole work, I understood that I am always working with, in all different places in the world, New York and Hartenstein, which is really far, very different regimes of thinking about natural history or stones. It always comes from the same mountain. So the idea was to understand where are all these stones that have not become yellow cake, not gone to Chernobyl, not came in the cloud back to Germany, let's say, but that are still in these collections, and how did they come there? So we have actually, in one book, we have traced back all the stones in all the German museum collection that come from that mine, and we recompose them as a kind of bubbly thing. And the idea is actually, what is it then? Like they are very different from each other, but they somehow are all from the same mountain. And my relation to the stone is, of course, a little bit like a short, because it's radioactive, so I have a short relation. I take it, I put it on the film sheet, and I leave it, and then I take it back to the collection. But the curator I work with, Ralf Schmidt, he has an eye for the stone. So he would tell me always before how long I have to expose. And that is something very amazing, and I'm always afraid for him because he's very close with his eyes looking. And I don't know what is his seeing tool, that he sees the radioactivity or something, but I think he sees the amount of pitch blende that is very, very black and very bubbly and quite strange, beautiful somehow. And that is really a superpower in radiation. But then, like in Hartenstein, for example, in the collection, we've gone with the students again because I want them to see where it all starts somehow. And we've been there with different Geiger counters, and we figured that a lot of stones are radioactive that are not called radioactive. So granites, different other stones. And so the radioactive collection is in a kind of room. So one of my students, he went along the wall of the room, and he's like, yeah, it's everywhere, radiation and stuff. So we thought, like, is this an autoradiograph of a wall? And is the wall already now radioactive, or is it the stones that kind of go through the wall, and again don't recognize our kind of border systems. So yeah, I think the idea of the borderless thing, it's something that fascinates me a lot. And also I don't know how to approach it, because wherever I put it, it has creates a different image, but none of the images have an above and a below, or a kind of right and left, so I can turn them and see a kind of, here I can see a triangle, okay, because it's cut triangularly, but the image that you used for advertising my talk, it's so like floating. It could be an elbow, it could be, some people say it's a chicken, some other people say it's an embryo, or it's just something abstract. So we always somehow try to find names for what this is, but I think the most fascinating thing is that I actually can't define the above and below and right and left of this radiation.
So you were talking about all of these different qualities of a forest, you know, the trees and the plants. In particular, you took a lot of photographs of these plants and these rocks that were extracted from this forest. And you mentioned the anigsberg mushroom at the end of the world. Yeah. And I especially given the fact that mushrooms accumulate radiation, right? And that's why in Germany people had to stop foraging them after Chernobyl. They seem like a really rich site for the kind of work that you're doing. And I was wondering if you've done anything with fungi.
Yeah, so the fungi are part of all the plants that I have harvested, because so there are different fungus, but the one that help the plants to actually survive on highly polluted ground are mycorrhiza. They're called mycorrhiza or endomycorrhiza, and they dwell around the roots of the plant, and they actually accumulate all the heavy metals to help the plant grow. It's not exactly a symbiosis, but it is kind of a together dwelling. And without these mycorrhiza, this plant would not grow. So in that sense, in all the images, in all the prints, are mushroom inside. I also have a little anecdote about working on these field laboratories in this really polluted landscape. We always come across people that harvest mushrooms to eat them, and we always tell them, like, you better not do it. And they say, we did it for 20 years, so why shouldn't we do it? And that's something that I find really interesting, because I think these people are actually quite cool. I mean, because they're probably much more dangerous things than this radiation that's in the mushroom. And so with Chernobyl, for example, what is very fascinating me is the book of Svetlana Alexievich, of Chernobyl Diary, or Chernobyl, the Chronicle of a Difficult Time. Because like in 1986, when Chernobyl happened, it really influenced me super much. It was before I already found nuclear power a bad idea, but I was only 12 or 13 and stuff. And then when Chernobyl happened, it was like the proof. It's a really bad idea. Then for me, for example, this place was a kind of destination where no one can go. So in my imagination and in my understanding of the newspaper articles, if you look at newspapers in 1986, any newspaper, you could see somehow by following these articles an argument with the newspaper, the journalists, the politicians, pro or anti-nuclear power. So in Karlsruhe, we did a little research on 26th of April 1986 until 26th of May 1986, and it was every day like, it's really dangerous, don't go outside, and next day like, hey, it doesn't matter at all, we can just go outside, it will be fine, and so on. It's like, in this sense, you can see the very waves this event took. But for me, being here in Germany, I mean there, That's like closed off area. It's super dangerous. Then reading the book of Alexievich, I learned that 4,000 people a day have worked there since 1986. The power plant ran until 2000, not block number 4, but block 1 and 2. And that there's also tourism now, Chernobyl tourism. And that everything that has been left in Pripyat, the village next to, or the city next to Chernobyl, where all the workers lived, also made its way into different places. So Svetlana Alexievich talks about the fur coat. That was a heritage of someone from grandmother that had to be left in Pripyat. Then secretly in the night, someone took the coat and it went to Minsk. And then there was a little nuclear reactor and people actually got quite affected by it. Or Susan Shipley writes about the film camera of Sevchenki that filmed just after the explosion, the block number 4, and the camera got it itself so radioactive that actually it is still in a lead coffin and it is still doing film somehow in a translated way. And that's super fascinating for me too, because it expands everything. Like when you think of working with photography or film or image making, you feel that you somehow, it has an end, or it's an entity, somehow you begin it and then it's finished and then that's the work. But then think about that film that has been made then, that is somehow alive, and then maybe everything is also alive. And so these things, and then of course in 95 I have been in Moscow on flea markets all the time, because I was 3 months working in Moscow, and I bought all kinds of stuff. So then later I thought, like, maybe I bought something from Chernobyl, like some, Soviet, how do you call it, kitschy things or something. And so I understand through these kind of researches how this thing that we talk as contained has very different life forms, and that it's not only pro or anti-nuclear, it's also that the humans like to take things with them, and entropy is all the time kind of active. It's active. That's great, but with the nuclear waste, or it's maybe not that great. and that's it.
Okay, I think we'll finish our question period here. Thank you again for your queries, and thank you to Susanne for the wonderful talk. If you haven't already done so, I invite you to visit the galleries where you can view Susanne's work, as well as the other 30 artists that are in the show. And in our bookstore, you'll find a book dummy of the upcoming book on the exhibition, The Lives of Documents, Photography as Project. So in that book, you'll find a wealth of information, kind of interviews with the artists, giving you more insight to the works in the show. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight.
Thank you.